Hello and welcome to another episode of Living Imperfectly Perfect Trauma Recovery Podcast with me, Jemma Blythe, the only podcast which turns imperfections into perfections and discusses living authentically ourselves. So without further ado, here we go. So this week we are going to be discussing the pesky little things we all know as trauma bonds. Trauma bonds are typically as pesky little links between the abuser and victim, but they can also occur in different situations, such as hostage situations, domestic violence situations, and even the army. But the thing is these are things that very rarely are spoken about. And why is that? Because they cause a stigma. Stigmas being mental health issues such as anxiety, CPTSD, PTSD, all those different kinds of things. Now, I will describe how trauma bonds are formed, but I will also describe how to overcome those pesky little things. So, let's get started.
Living imperfectly perfect, it's true. We rise from our struggles, break through. Together we'll find something brand new. 'Cause living imperfect is what we do. Live perfectly perfect. Let's go.
So, trauma bonds can look like giving people gifts, manipulating people, blackmailing. Whenever somebody does something really nice for you, that can just ingratiate you further with that person. That was true for me in both sexual abuse and domestic abuse. So when we think about trauma bonds, the way I think about it is like a rope being stretched and being pulled. So when a rope is pulled and twisted and manipulated, can you see what I'm doing here? It adds another inch on the rope. So I didn't know about trauma bonds until I did my therapy back in 2022. And when the therapist told me about trauma bonds, I thought, he's joking. He must be joking. And he described it to me as an unseen bond between a victim and abuser, which it really is. It's like when something leaves a scar, like a mark, which can't be seen, it's underneath the skin. That's almost what trauma bond feels like. It leaves a weight, it leaves a pressure either on your shoulders or on your chest, and it won't move. So trauma bonds can look like physical things like gifts, showing kindness, multiple things like that, but it can also show up as somebody appearing isolated from the people that should be able to help. It shows up as somebody who stands up for their abuser, somebody who seems to be quite intelligent and quite switched on in that situation. Now, for me, I was, or I thought I was. But you need to, when you break the trauma bond, it doesn't happen instantly. It happens over time. Yes, you can distance yourself from your abuser, and I absolutely recommend that. You can make sure that you put boundaries in. So you turn around to them and say, no, do you know what? I'm not doing that. Or you can speak and tell people what is happening with you and what you need to do to get out of that situation. But there are also lovely things that you can do which break the trauma bond, such as self-discovery or self-archaeology, as I like to call it now. Um, and you can do that. Write down prompts, write down what morals you had beforehand. Write down the music that you were interested in beforehand. Write down the movies that you enjoyed, the hobbies that you had. Write a letter to your younger self, write a letter to your future self. But one of the things I recommend, which is quite unusual, is when I was going through therapy, I used a mind map because I like things to be quite visual and easy to see. So I used to put quotes on that used to inspire me. I used to draw the occasional thing like Harry Potter's lightning bolt scar. Um, I used to write quotes that my dad used to say. I used to write quotes that grandma used to say. All those little things that just reconnect and bring you back to center and show you that you can move past this bond. It's the way that I would describe a trauma bond is heartbreaking, powerful, intimate, but breaking it is beautiful because you discover things about yourself that you had forgotten and that were kept buried for so, so long. Now, when you break a trauma bond, it's necessary for a therapist to be involved. That is number one. You cannot do this without a therapist. Number two is get a life coach. And that's not just me saying life coaches are absolutely amazing because we are, but therapists are there to be able to guide you down any mental health avenue that you might come across when you break a trauma bond or when you even think about breaking a trauma bond. Mental health is there all the time, and it's sometimes simmering away in the background until we become more self-aware, until we know how to process what we've been through. So, something that I like to do is I like to work in conjunction with a therapist. So if somebody comes to me that's already been through trauma, we talk, we discuss in the discovery session, which is free, by the way. Then we move through, we talk about what they're going to do, whether they're going to see a therapist, which I would absolutely solely recommend that you see a therapist, either before, after, or during even a life coaching course. But life coaches are there to implement, recommend new strategies, recommend new habits, pick up new habits, form those, and become healthier. Now, for me, how does a trauma bond link to living imperfectly perfect? Well, trauma bonds are versions of what I would class at the higher end of absolute imperfection. They are something that very few people talk about. And they are something that very few people know about. But they make you resilient. They make you have multiple connections to different people. They make you realize what you are capable of. They give you a strength which is unmatched by absolutely anything else. But here's something that I would like you to do. Share something which, if you've been through trauma, has got you through. Share something on social media, be it book, film, music. I want to hear about it. And make sure you share it with the hashtag Living Imperfectly Perfect. Whether you put podcast on, please feel free. It's up to you. And make sure you tag me at Gemma.e.blythe on Instagram. And I will share it and shout you out on the next episode of Living Imperfectly Perfect. So share, share, share away. And I will see you in a couple of weeks where we will be discussing the anniversaries and difficult anniversaries coming up throughout the year, and I will give you coping strategies to deal with those too. But until then, subscribe to my newsletter, follow the podcast, share the podcast, and just practice being you. Embrace your authentic self. Much love.
Not the show, living imperfectly perfect. It's